I love ChatGPT because I run my own business. ChatGPT has been very helpful in that. And so what I was able to do was throw up a survey up, got 7,000 responses to the survey. I'm not going through that. I stripped all the data, PII, so the personal identifying information, and I threw it into ChatGPT and I said, can you please help me with understanding some of the trends that came through this data? It's been very helpful for being a thought partner of like, here's a research plan. So if you have like a plan to do retention research and you put it into ChatGPT or another tool and you ask it things like, what am I missing? What segments might I be missing? What haven't I thought about? What perspectives should I think about? What gaps are in this research plan? Rip it apart, essentially. That's been super helpful.
Hello, everyone. We are going to slowly start. I have Nikki Anderson with me, who's a user research consultant. Welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for making the time today. And I'm Amelia. I'm the VP of Marketing here at UserPilot. And UserPilot is a product growth platform that helps products, but also user research, UX teams, understand their users better and then actually act on these insights easier inside their product. So we offer product analytics, but also these in-app onboarding experience and in-app surveys, so teams can collect feedback and consolidate it very easily with the quantitative data from, like the click capture and basically from product behavioral data. So the topic we'll be discussing today is retention research. Retention, one of my favorite topics, very excited about it. But Nikki, how did you get into retention research? It's not something like, you wake up one day as a 5-year-old and you say to your mom, I want to be a retention researcher when I grow up. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, not at all. I woke up wanting to be a vet, and then I realized that means that animals get hurt. So that didn't last very long. Second only to retention research. But yeah, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to be here, and I am Nikki Anderson. I'm a qualitative user researcher. I've been in the field for about 11 and 12 years now. So I've seen all the fun ups and downs of the user research and UX and product fields, really. And I found out about user research at a bar when I went to a party in New York City. So that's how I figured out UX existed. And then I absolutely fell in love with the art of research and just understanding people and learning about them. And in terms of retention research specifically, what really stood out to me is I realized that a lot of companies, all companies want to make money. And in order to make money, we have to retain customers. So I realized how important it was to understand the motivations and mental models behind retention and churn, because that's the other side of it. And then also really realized that specifically companies focused on churn rather than retention. So that was the big number. And so I went into understanding how we can start to understand why we are keeping people and how to make that even better and get even more people to stay within our products. It was kind of a weird trajectory, but it was, to be honest, it was a lot of failed churn projects that led me to learning more and really looking at retention research.
Fair enough. We're going to dive into that. So retention research, you mentioned the failed churn projects. I have a few, gory stories about that as well when, actually we just implemented UserPilot in my previous startup I was working at as a marketing manager. And we created basically a churn survey asking people, hey, why are you leaving? And to my absolute, dismay, it turned out that some people were leaving because they thought that we didn't have certain features that we in fact did have.
Oh yeah.
Classic. So the features, maybe the UX wasn't intuitive enough, right? They couldn't find them. So they were kind of giving up on the tool because of that. And that gave me an aha moment that these churn surveys are actually really helpful. But the retention research isn't only about churn surveys. What does it actually entail? If you could explain to us, like we're 5, what is it?
Yeah. I guess it's 100% like churn surveys they're really, really difficult. And the reason that I kind of tell companies and advise companies to flip the script a little bit and focus more on retention research is it is the understanding of why people are staying with you, the understanding of what those people are going through, the pain points that they're experiencing despite staying with you, because we all know we stay with things even when they are painful experiences, because either we feel like we have to or we have some trust and loyalty with the product, and looking into those unmet needs. So that's what retention research really focuses on, is like, why are people staying with you? What is making them stay? What is still angering them? What is still blocking them? And the reason why I talk about flipping that script and focusing on the people who are continuing to pay you is because, one, they are continuing to pay you, so you want to continue to retain them.
Mm.
Two, they can give you probably a lot more information on the product and their experience than a churned person might be able to, because there are so many reasons for churn that are also outside of a company's control, right? So retention research is really focused on people who are actually going through the experience multiple times on whatever cadence would make sense for your project. And three, churn people don't care about your company anymore, even if you offer them money. So I have failed many a churn project because, I mean, surveys, you can get away with it a little bit more. But like, if you want to dig into why people leave and you're sitting there like I did, and I was like, oh, we are going to do this beautiful full scale qualitative interview process where we're going to talk to like all these different segments and like 12 to 15 people per segment. And we're going to understand churn. Nobody showed up. Nobody signed
Oh.
up. Like, I think I had one person and they were like, they literally signed up because they had like been in product before and they understood how hard recruitment was.
Mm-hmm. So out of pity, in a sense.
Yeah, somebody was sitting there being like, this poor girl is just,
Mhm.
probably not talking to anybody. So like, those three reasons are why I tend to recommend retention research, but it's really about understanding your current customers who are paying you, who are subscribed to you, who are going through the experience and trying to use your product, and focusing in on them in particular and
Mm.
why they are staying, but what they are still experiencing as problems, because I guarantee you they are having pain points and unmet needs still.
Got it. So, in fact, because this term could be misunderstood by some people into churn research, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the flip side. Well, retention, on the other hand, we have churn. But the goal here is retention. Well, in fact, it's like user research with the retention as a goal in mind. Yeah, that is definitely flipping the script. And I'm not sure how many product people have done this and are actively doing this. It totally makes sense when to shift, your focus from churn research to retention research. Can you maybe tell us a little bit from your experience in the companies that you worked at, either full time or as a consultant? What was the impact of this mindset shift when you changed from churn research into retention research?
Yeah, so much. So like, the entire point of retention research is to increase retention,
Mm.
right? Whatever metrics you are looking at, success criteria you are looking at, like for example, like retention rate, customer lifetime value, whatever metrics you're attributing in your organization to retention, it's to improve those metrics. So that's the entire point. And the problem is if we're looking at churned users, what happens to those users who are still trying to work with us but might be on the edge and on like the brink of churning, who we might be able to talk to and come bring back, because we're addressing the problems, we're addressing the unmet needs. So the big shift that happened is that instead of spending a lot of time, money, and effort on trying to reach people who don't care about us anymore, who are
Mm.
no longer interested, who we've probably lost trust with, because these days you can lose trust with your customers in a minute and won't come back. And not only that, they will tell everybody else not to come to you.
Mm, hmm, for sure, yeah.
Reviews matter. People
Yeah.
use reviews so much. So if your product can get reviewed, that will be seen, right? So the biggest shift was instead of focusing on these people who are quite frankly out the door, not saying that people aren't important. Of course, there's an important part of churn to think about, but instead of that, we were focused on things that were actually tangible that could very, very clearly increase the thing that we cared about the most, which is revenue. So we went and we were understanding the current customers, which meant less wasted development time on features that didn't matter. We got to deprioritize features that people didn't care about. And then we reprioritized features that people did then care about. And those completely changed the trajectory of the product roadmap. Right. So we were no longer sitting there being like, well, um, we had this feature and we should enhance this feature. And it's like, no, nobody's using that. It's actually a pain point for people. And instead, let's focus on this feature that will solve these pain points that people are currently actually having. Right. So like we completely reprioritized the product roadmaps for those particular projects, and then grew our recurring revenue and grew our overall revenue. And we were able to positively impact things like customer lifetime value because people were more satisfied. Therefore, they were staying with us a longer amount of time rather than dipping out. And like one thing that I do recommend is looking into your analytics and seeing the point where people usually churn, and try to find participants for your research that are right around that time frame, because usually we can find, oh, well, it seems like in 3 months people usually leave. Okay, what has happened? Like, target people who are like 2.5 months into using your product and understand what their experience might be, because you could keep them, which is a lot less expensive than losing somebody and then trying to acquire new users.
Yeah, no, 100%. There are countless studies that are showing that the impact of retention on, revenue down the line is so much more important than, even acquiring new users. If you have the right retention rate, your LTV is longer, your CAC is much, much lower. All these downstream metrics basically improve. While, if your retention rate, like if you have a churn rate of even 5%, that means you're exchanging over 50% of your users every year. Like you're in this hamster wheel. And focusing on the ones that churned, ironically, it just struck me because yes, this is very intuitive. This is what product teams are doing. Yes, let's ask people why they left. But in fact, there are so many factors why they could have left. Even, from the very beginning, maybe they were the wrong fit. Maybe marketing didn't target the right people in this particular cohort. Maybe there was some sort of a campaign that wasn't entirely aligned with the persona. Maybe we overpromised, right, on something that we couldn't deliver. Sales likes to do that. They're selling features that aren't even on the roadmap yet just to get the sale through the door. And then these people churn. But focusing on the ones that are actually using the tool and how to give them more value, as you said, by building the features that would solve their existing problems, rather than focusing on experience with, well, what we already have. Like, yeah, of course, that's important, but not only. That is going to actually move the needle when it comes to retaining users. So let's talk about that, because I'm sure our viewers here, the audience is dying to know how to conduct this retention research. What steps do teams need to take to get good results from your perspective?
So luckily, it's much easier than conducting churn research. So that's already exciting, right?
Yeah. All years.
Yeah. So what I recommend doing is usually a mixed methods approach. And what that tends to look like, so the most common mixed methods approaches in user research is like a survey and some qualitative interviews. Now, depending on how much information you have, you can do one before the other, and I can talk through that briefly. But I always recommend a mixed methods approach because it gives you the scale that you get from quant and the depth that you get from qual. And those two things together, like it's not one versus the other. They should primarily always be used together whenever possible. And so, as I had mentioned before, one of the best things that you can do is look into your data analytics and understand where are people starting to churn. Is there an average time span, or is there an average point, an average season, an average or a segment that seems to
Mhm.
churn repeatedly? Are there any sort of trends that you can find in the data? And then ideally, you are targeting those people in particular. So for instance, when I worked at a travel company, we had a recurring model where you were paying monthly for something, and we realized that after 3 months in particular, people just dropped off the face of the earth and like never came back to us, right? And that was really, really bad because we were going through our customer acquisition. Our CAC was way too high. So we were just burning through that. And at a certain point, you're going to lose because there are only so many people and only so much money that you can put towards that. So what I did is I was like, interesting. So people are dropping off at 3 months. So
Mhm.
I targeted people who were at about 2 or 2.5 months of using our product. So they signed up about 2.5 months ago. And then I looked into if there were any type of segments that I could find. So did people travel for like more leisure travel? Was it business-based travel? Was it family travel? Were we looking at international versus domestic travel? Those kinds of segments to see if there was anything in the trends there. And we found that leisure travelers who signed up for this tended to just drop off at that 3 month mark. So I targeted them in particular. And that's what I recommend doing, because for this kind of research, it's not particularly helpful to just talk to anybody who's an existing customer. And the reason being, like, you're going to get such a scattered amount of insights that qualitative depth is going to end up being quite shallow, actually. So what I recommend doing in this case is I sent out a survey. So sending out a survey, which includes a little bit of screener information. So what do you tend to, what type of travel do you use our platform for? And it's like leisure, business, et cetera, et cetera. And then I asked them their satisfaction levels, which you can use the you can use the UMUX or the UMUX Lite. Those are the two that I recommend. They're two metrics. Um,
Okay. What would that stand for? Maybe if you
oh
could explain
gosh.
it. Okay, sorry, not a trick question.
No, this is the hardest metric that I can never remember, is the UMUX, which is the
Oh, we can quickly Google it.
uh,
ChatGPT.
something measurement of user experience.
Mm. I'm curious because we haven't covered this metric on our blog yet, and I thought
You cover
we covered everything under the sun, right? But today I learned
Yeah. So
you okay.
UMUX.
Yeah. Oh, UMUX.
Yeah.
UMUX meaning.
And it's something like something measure of user experience,
Uh-huh.
or measure
Uh,
of user experience.
yeah. I'm just leaving ChatGPT with this now that I haven't misspelled it.
Ah,
Uh,
usability metric for user experience.
cool. So you use that metric,
Yep.
right?
So that metric looks at a few different things, but it includes
Mhm.
satisfaction in it. And then I also ask a more broad understanding of usability. And that might be that SEQ, which is the single ease questionnaire. And that's a one question metric that asks how easy or difficult is it for you to use. And then you can put in your tool. And I might ask some other kinds of questions, like what kind of travel are you generally looking for? How often are you using the platform? What's your biggest open text field? What's the biggest pain point that you have? Well, what's the biggest
Mhm.
frustration that you have? What's something that you wish our platform could do that it didn't? When was the last struggle that you had? When was the last time you contacted customer support? Like those kinds of questions. And then I would send that out into the universe. And I would then ask at the end of that survey, are you interested in coming in for a 60-minute interview? And they say yes or no. And then if yes, they give their email. So then I will go through those people and I will find ones that are relevant for what we need. and I will invite them into 60-minute interviews. And in
Mm-hmm.
this interview, I just am like, tell me and like this is where user research is kind of sad because we focus on negativity. Like we do. Like I'm not here to say great job product team because like that's not actionable. Like of
Mm-hmm.
course I'm going to say, "Hey, you're doing great with this or that. Like this is working. Don't change it, please." But like I'm there, I sit down and I'm like, tell me everything that's going wrong when you use the product. Tell me about your worst experience. Tell me about what happened. Tell me about what you did to make it better, if you could make it better. Tell me about all the things that are missing. Tell me about all the things that are confusing. And for 60 minutes, essentially, I have them rip apart the product. And like they might be
Wow.
sharing their screen and showing me the different things that are not going well so that I can then take video clips and send them to the team. But it's really honing in on that, on those unmet needs. So those things that don't exist that they need, that they would make their lives easier, as well as the problems that they're encountering that we can then try and solve for.
Mm-hmm. Do you incentivize them in any way to participate in these 60-minute interviews? Because that's something you mentioned with churn surveys. Like nobody cares about the product they already, like stopped using. Like, why should they give you this feedback for free and waste their time? Even if you incentivize these people, typically they don't care about like an Amazon voucher or $100 because they're not gonna use the product anymore. They already done.
Done.
The ones that are still going to use the product are a bit more invested because obviously this is like quality life improvements for them. But did you
Yeah.
still somehow make it more attractive for them? How did you go about it?
Always incentivize. It depends.
Mhm.
If you like, an Amazon voucher is a common one. It depends on your niche though. Like I like for instance, I remember I was consulting and doing helping out some work for a small business
Mhm.
who was trying to understand their sellers. And they were like, yeah, send out Amazon vouchers. And I was like, I don't think small business owners are huge fans of Amazon. Like
Mhm.
let's maybe think about a different voucher. So really think about your niche and like what they might want. But like Amazon vouchers are very common, or things like discounts to your product, or like credits to your product, if that's something that they might appreciate, or vouchers to something else that they might appreciate. So we did Amazon for a little while. This was back in Germany. And then like I realized that Germans weren't very like thrilled about Amazon. There were like some that were like, could you do something else? And so we ended up giving out Amazon vouchers to a grocery store chain in
Mhm.
Germany. And that worked so much better. So think about your niche, but usually usually what I do recommend is making sure that you are incentivizing, because that will help you with recruitment.
You mentioned a little bit, yeah, as you said, like we need to align the incentive with the expectations of the users in the local market. Sometimes we need to do some research, what resonates. I'm thinking if one could use the incentive to actually like kill two birds with one stone, or say feed two birds with one stone, and promote product usage, maybe like give them extra credits or unlock certain premium features, bump them up to the next plan. That is also a good idea to really improve, like gain some insights and do this retention research, but also improve loyalty and increase usage. So something I can think of, but I still wanted to touch upon segmentation. You
Yeah.
mentioned it in between the lines, but it's so important, right? Obviously, to get actionable insights, you can talk to your entire user base, and then probably there are different personas there, especially if you have a larger platform. Like User Pilot is a horizontal B2B SaaS. So we combine into one platform, we combine like pretty much three different tools that talk to each other, of course, but they have different value props, right? So there is the analytics aspect, there is the surveys, feedback collection aspect, and then there is the user engagement aspect. They're also used for different jobs to be done, and surprise, surprise, by different personas. So if I were to just like try to gauge insights from user research from all the different personas, all the different use cases, I would end up being pulled in all directions. How do you prevent that? Are there any tips for what to prioritize? You prioritize by ACV, which customers, which accounts give you, which personas give you most value? How do you go about it?
Yeah, great question. So the way that I choose my segmentation is very much working with my business partners, so my
Mm,
product managers, my data analysts, and also really thinking hard about the company objectives, which usually defaults to, let's say, what is the persona or group of people that are bringing us the highest what is the highest risk.
mm-hmm,
So the highest retention, or sorry, the highest revenue group would be a high risk group, because if we start to lose people from that group, especially in a B2B setting, that gets really scary. So for instance, when I was working at a B2B SaaS platform, um, we did we did really large scale qualitative research, like personas, journey maps, service blueprints. Like, we were doing large scale stuff, but we couldn't just go out and talk to our users. We had to group them by function. And so I had to go to the CEO and be like, cool, who do we care about? Like, what size is the company that we care about? What industry is the company that we care about? What are other factors that are like impacting the revenue stream that we're getting from these companies? And so then we decided to focus on small, medium enterprise businesses within the e-commerce space. And from there, I said, okay, cool. I'm going to focus on social media managers, because
mm-hmm,
those are the users of our product that are the ones that I know at the end of the renewal period will tell their boss, screw this product, let's find something else, or hey, yeah, let's renew. So
mm-hmm.
you just have to go. There's no easy answer to segmentation, but I usually have a lot of conversations with PMs, with data analysts, with C-suite directors, whomever has like that kind of goal and understanding of like who our biggest customers are. And I start to just shrink that into a smaller and smaller place until I'm like, cool, we're talking to this segment now, and we can talk to 12 of them, which might sound like a very scary number for people who are used to quantitative data. But when you've segmented those 12 people, I promise you, you are going to be so freaking bored by this 10th interview, because you are hearing the same things over and over again. So that's kind of how I think about segmentation, is that value of like, or I will go to the CEO and they will say, well, we're going into a new market. And I'm like, cool. So within that new market, who are we targeting?
Mm.
Do we have any information on that? And then try and shrink it down to a manageable segment.
Got it. Got it. So to sum it up, like segmenting by persona, the value, proposition. Yeah, yeah. But that like comes with the hidden cost of having to listen to the same sort of story again and again, of course.
Yeah.
And when you have limited resources,
Yes.
like we work with companies now, it's like they're trending larger, but we used to work with SMBs a lot. And often we were working with a team of one, a product team of one.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize then? What kind of retention research would make the most impact?
Yeah. So I'm a I grew up in startups with no resources,
Mm-hmm.
and no budget, no tooling. And I'm oftentimes asked to come back to those very situations, because they are the ones that I'm actually the most comfortable and familiar with. So if you are struggling with resources and you're sitting there saying, well, talking to 12 people and incentivizing them and finding them and doing all this stuff feels too much, the first thing that I would recommend doing is actually going through any data that you currently have to try and make things more specific for you. So, for instance, when I have done this in the past with fewer resources and I was unable to do the full scale stuff that I'd like to, I went to customer support, and I said, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go through some customer support tickets. The thing that I can't give you is time. Unfortunately, all of these things are time intensive, but you can do small chunks of them. and slowly build this information and knowledge. And so I went through customer support tickets and I tried to identify the biggest complaints that I found. And so I identified those, and then I put up a survey and asking, have you had this problem in the past, 1 month, let's say? And I had an open text field and I said, can you just describe the problem you had and like what you wish was different? And like from that, I got qualitative responses. And then I could form even more of a hypothesis. And then over time, I decided, okay, I'm going to take 2 customer calls on this particular problem every week for the next 6 weeks. So
Mhm.
like I was still able to, between customer support tickets, narrow down the problem. When you don't have budget or resources, narrow the scope, pick the biggest 2 problems, put up a survey, ask people if they've had those problems in the past month, if they're willing to share more, and then slowly interview them over time. And I promise you that that will help you with understanding then the biggest problems to fix and then how to solve those problems.
Mm. Yeah, you didn't mention it because you mentioned analyzing the support tickets and like quantitative data.
Yeah.
The word of the year hasn't, been uttered yet in this conversation. AI.
Yes.
That obviously is going to help a lot, even for smaller teams, for startups, to make sense of all the insights.
Mhm.
How has, how has the sort of like impact of LLMs affected your work? Are you using AI tools a lot for retention research? How are you using them? If you could share a little bit, which ones?
Yeah, I love ChatGPT. It's
Mm.
like it's at a point where like those like memes or like those reels where it's like me and ChatGPT and it's like that blank like it cut out of a person and I'm like, you know what? I get it. I get it.
Mhm.
Because I run my own business. ChatGPT has been very helpful in that. Like I rely on it a lot to help me with running my consultancy, my coaching, all of the stuff that I managed to get done. But when it comes to research in particular, it's a very fine balance. So for instance, I was in a consultancy gig and, and they were like, cool, like we need the answer to this now. And I was like, oh, okay. That's nice. And so what I was able to do was throw a survey up, got 7,000 responses to the survey.
Mm.
I'm not going through that. I'm sorry. I
Wow, 10,000.
Yeah, 7,000 and it was qualitative. There was a mix of quant.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, nah, that's not going to happen. So I stripped all the data, PII, so the personal
Mhm.
identifiable information from it, made sure there was absolutely nothing in there, stripped also like the company name out of there, like took out everything that was essentially any sort of PII. And I threw it into ChatGPT and I said, can you please help me with understanding some of the trends that came through
Mm.
this data? The so that was helpful. And that could help you with like this customer support thing. I always say check with your legal team if that's okay. So I had to check with the legal team at this consultancy gig to make sure it was okay for me to put that information in. And I shared with them the exact stuff that I was going to put in, and they said, "Yeah, there's nothing in here. Like you might as well have just written this up yourself." So always check. The biggest problem that I'm seeing. So when I've asked it to help me with synthesizing things like qualitative interviews, it still hallucinates a lot. It still has
Wow.
a really hard time pulling out like human nuance and patterns in that sense. But for like the larger scale data and pulling out trends, it's been very helpful for being a thought partner of like, here's a research plan. So if you have like a plan to do retention research and you put it into ChatGPT or another tool, and you ask it things like, what am I missing? what segments might I be missing? What haven't I thought about? What perspectives should I think about? What gaps are in this research plan? Like rip it apart, essentially. That's been super helpful. I literally ask ChatGPT on a daily basis to rip my ideas apart and rebuild them with me. So yeah, I would say large scale data, pretty helpful. The qual stuff, still not 100% there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is interesting. I haven't used ChatGPT for like large scale data analysis for a bit, and the models are improving at such a fast rate, and I feel what I did 3 or 6 months ago isn't even relevant and what it can do anymore. But yeah, most definitely in the early days, it still wasn't. I remember I was going on an offsite and I wanted to do like a win-loss analysis. I had very little time. So I just wanted it to segment the data and tell me, what were the like lost reasons and what was the impact on revenue. And it just couldn't do it at this point. It was still not able to generate graphs, for instance. It
Yeah.
still isn't able to generate graphs. Like no matter which model I use, it can be like the deep research model O4 mini, it can be like O3. It still doesn't do a good job. Like it doesn't understand nonlinear relationships at all.
No.
So that's definitely you need like statistical tools for that. I actually went to a conference recently, and there was this one lady, also from the UK, who is creating a tool for like statistical research analysis, but more for like the B2B use case and marketing and product use cases. That is like leveraging AI to do all this. I think it's called Maple. Please check it out. I haven't used it yet, so this is not like personal endorsement or like paid promotion or anything, but just saying that there are people who are trying to solve for this problem. Cool, amazing. We are getting close to our to the end of our time. Wanted to ask you just one last question. What are kind of the best practices to getting started with retention research? Like if you have never done it, what are your first 3 steps you need to do?
Great question. First 3 steps, if you have never done retention research. So the first step I would say would be to define what you're trying to get out of it. So what is the goal of it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen a lot of times it can happen where teams will do this and then not make any changes. There's nothing worse that will piss people off, piss your audience off, than like talking to them and taking the time to talk to them and then not doing anything. So making sure that like the intention is we're going to do this stuff to uncover improvements and we're going to make the changes and we have time to do that. So getting really clear on like what it is that you want out of this research, and being sure that you can commit to that in like a timely way when you do get the insights, and also being open to people ripping things apart, because that is where the improvements come from. So make sure that you're in that kind of headspace. The second thing that I would recommend is finding just one segment. Like when we think about things like retention or even churn or jobs to be done or these big things, they can get really lofty, they can get really like out of scope. So choose like one particular segment, like I had mentioned, leisure travelers who were doing international travel, or my small medium enterprise project of social media managers. Like get clear on like one particular segment that is the most valuable for your organization or for your product, and just dive into that one. So that and get just talk to a lot of people to understand what that is. And then the third step would be to, I would say, like just start with a survey. Like you will need to dive into the qual, but first start with a survey and see how much information you get from gathering like the types of problems that you're seeing and trying to find the trends within those. Because I know that I just said that you will have to do qual and quant are better together. We shouldn't only really do one. We should do a mixture of both of them, but there might be things that you can fix before you even do qualitative research. So it would be a waste of time to talk about that stuff in qualitative research. So like, for instance, with quant, with the survey for leisure travelers, we found we found out that our filters sucked, and people were pretty prescriptive in our search, telling about why our filters were so bad and what they were missing. And we were actually able to make changes and do some quick, like, iterative usability tests before we went into qual. And that already made a huge difference for people. Right. So I would say those are the three things: really get in the mindset and understand why you're doing it and what outcomes you want to achieve, and be open. Focus on one segment in particular, and then start with a survey asking people screener questions to make sure you're targeting the right segment if you can't do that with a tool. And then really focusing in on like what those pain points are for them and what those unmet needs are for them.
That's great advice for, especially these small teams that are short on resources, because we can outsource the qualitative data analysis and, to some extent, qualitative survey responses to LLMs, but we can't still outsource the interviews and actually listening to the users, empathizing with their problems, because there's like we had another speaker on the series this month who was writing about emotional churn, right? That a lot of people are disengaging even before their contract has expired, and you don't see this churn on your bottom line yet, but it's already happening, right? You see the lack of engagement on the product usage side, but you can only understand where this lack of engagement is coming from. Is it like completely independent from your tool? Maybe some people are just like going through a busy time in their lives or deprioritizing a specific initiative. That's one thing, but maybe it's because your tool sucks and they think so. And you can't discover that until you have analyzed and you actually talked to them. So thank you so much, Nikki. This was super insightful. Gave me a lot of food for thought on how we are doing things, because I think still we're probably doing a lot more of the churn research rather than retention research, something to flip. Do we have any questions from the audience? We still have a couple more minutes. Nikki, what is the best way to connect with you? Maybe some people will have questions afterwards or after watching the replay.
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. That's the best way. Nikki Anderson. I'm on there pretty much all the time because that is part of my job.
I'm sure a lot of people will reach out, and I will, send your link, your LinkedIn profile link. Oh, there is a question. How do you measure UX KPI? Oh, that one.
Yeah. So the UMUX is a standardized metric already. So there's two versions of it. There's the UMUX and there's the UMUX Lite. The UMUX asks 4 questions. The UMUX Lite only asks 2. You can find it on pretty much anywhere, what it is, but measuring you, hold on one second, UMUX. Here we go. What I recommend is taking a look at this article. I'm a huge fan of the team over at Measuring You, and they tell you in that article what the questions are that you should be asking, and you literally just ask those questions, and it's on a 5 or 7 point scale. I think a 7-point scale. Yes. 7-point scale, and you just track that over time. So I hope that was helpful.
Was it helpful? It was an anonymous question, so I can't.
Yeah, hopefully it was.
Yeah, we have another one from Lina. From your perspective, should retention research only be conducted when initiated by stakeholders, or should be a standard practice to carry out regularly?
regularly. I'm a huge fan of so there's two kinds of research. There's reactive research and proactive research.
Mm,
Both of them have their space and time. Neither is good nor bad. Reactive research is when people are coming to you with requests. So you might find that a stakeholder comes to you with a request like this, but proactive research tends to be this really high impact stuff where you are going out and saying, hey, every 6 months, every year, let's say, we are doing retention based research. And I think it should be a standardized practice at organizations because it is so impactful. So I would recommend if your stakeholders aren't initiating it or requesting it, you go out and do it because the
mm.
stuff that you're going to bring back, they're going to love and that they're going to be like, why don't we do this every day?
Yeah, and depending again on the org structure, like in some smaller organizations, who are the stakeholders? They are the C-suite that probably don't know the difference between retention, churn, research. It shouldn't come from them because they're not trained in product and may not be aware that these exercises should be conducted regularly, right?
Yeah.
Um, Another question. How do you convince the board leadership that retention research is important? Oh, that's a very good one. I love that one, Khaled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, revenue.
Hmm.
So what I usually do is I start to pull numbers, looking at customer lifetime value or any sort of recurring revenue that might come from this, and really trying to showcase them. Okay, listen, our let's say that you have a customer lifetime value for the organization that I worked with of 3 months, right? And so people were paying €9 a month for 3 months, which means that people's customer lifetime values were €27. That's not
Wow.
really helpful when it comes to revenue. And we can have small subscription sizes and lots of them, and that's great, and that all works. But what I start to do is I say, look at all the potential revenue we are missing. Even if we were able to understand why people are leaving and fix that so they stay double the amount of time, suddenly we are at 64. I can't do math. This is why I'm in qualitative research. Suddenly we have €64 for a customer lifetime value. We are doubling that revenue if we find out people can stay for another 3 months. So if we extend that, we've already doubled our recurring revenue. So I usually go and pull these kinds of numbers and showcase to them, this is what we are literally missing out on. And then I will pull the CAC, the customer acquisition cost, and I will say, and this is what we're paying for new users, and it's usually a lot more money than it has to be. And then I will say, if we extended these people for another 3 months, we could lower our CAC and get more revenue in the end. So pull the numbers and just be smart about what they care about, which is usually revenue, and talk to them in their language as much as you can.
Yeah, the CAC by LTV metric is
Yeah.
super, super important. And yeah, typically leadership. So I totally understand the question that came here from the audience from Khaled. I'm experiencing the same, as a marketing leader, that we're focusing always on acquisition of new users and very little attention is actually spent on A, retention, B, expansion, right? So making sure we analyze the behavior of the user, we understand which of the value props are important to them and what they are using and what they are not using still. That could be helpful. This could also be discovered in the process of retention research. So you can actually upsell them on the additional features that maybe are locked in higher plans but are aligned with the value that they're getting out of your tool.
Yeah.
Another follow-up question. How do you even get in the door with leadership when leadership might be hostile to functions in the org not named devs? Oh, slightly
Um,
loaded.
yeah, this one is a bit of a tough one, but I would
Mm,
say If you are one, make champions then of the functions that they are not hostile towards. So
Mm,
whenever I've struggled with research buy-in directly with exec stakeholders, I will find a champion of like a product manager, let's say, or a dev, to help me facilitate those conversations, because then they can loop it up. Oh, I worked with Nikki on this project. It was really, really important. It was really helpful. So try and find your champions that are on the functions that they do seem to not be as hostile about, and try and get them to help you champion this cause.
mm,
Another thing that it depends, because hostile is quite a strong word, so it sounds really difficult. But another thing that you can try and do is approach the leadership and say, "Hey, I'm I'm really wanting to make this company, or like improve this company and work together and collaborate. Like, here are some ideas that I have. It's not anything that you need to do, or say yes to necessarily, but here are just some like ideas that I have." And then even better if you can say they've been backed by, you
data.
know, yeah, the data, but not only
Mm,
that, but other functions. So
mm,
when I've gone to execs with big research ideas, I've been like, oh, well, Joe, the product manager,
right.
is also backing this. Ben, the dev, is also backing this because they've seen what research can do. So when you go into these, first off, make sure you're speaking the exec's language, or the leadership language, but try and get that buy-in from others that they do seem to resonate with, and help you with like pushing that forward. That's the only thing that I can really think of off the top of my head without additional context.
Yeah, yeah, no, these are great tips, honestly. Thank you so much, Nikki. And I know we're over time, and people are staying, I know it's getting late for you, but super valuable tips to get these champions in other departments to back up your claims with data on how, these research outcomes have actually in the past or can extend the lifetime value of the customers, and that like affects basically probably the decision makers perception of the value of investing in retention research, as opposed to just being on the bandwagon of pushing more features out relentlessly, just adding more because the competitor added more or whatever. We need to catch up with whatever they're thinking. And thank you so much for the valuable conversation. We will be sending out your article in the follow-up email together with the replay, and the way to connect with Nikki. Best way is on LinkedIn, as we said. And we're looking forward to seeing you all there. And yeah, thanks again. Have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye, guys.